Hey, this is John Carlos, and I'm here with a look at the Star Wars The Black Series action figure of Darth Vader from Return of the Jedi. Now here's a look at the little image of old Anakin Skywalker from Return of the Jedi with Luke, and a little wording on the back of the packaging there. One thing worth noting is that the packaging features blue highlights, whereas previous packagings had orange highlights, including back there, and also it used to be like a little black strip that went across the top. Like this little cardboard piece used to connect all the way. And now the symbol is like a circular symbol inset against plastic. I'm quite disappointed by this head. Now this head is based on Return of the Jedi, so the helmet and the face mask come off, which we'll get to in a bit. But the one thing that just disappoints me right off the bat is just how like the dimensions of the mask are not, accurate at all. You can see like how fat like his neck is, and how like kind of smooth the eye to the cheek to the mouth area is. The way it kind of lines up with the mask, it's not correct. It's just sculpted poorly. For comparison, here is the Kotobukiya Artifacts Plus statue, and you can just see like dimensionally how this sculpt should look. These are pretty close in scale, but just like the way that his mask rests into his helmet, and just how oddly sculpted the eyes are, and just how wide the face is, how big and flat it is, it just doesn't look right. I think they did a really lousy job with that. Also, the helmet does not secure to anything, so if you're like just hanging out, it just sort of, it falls off really easily. But let's take a closer look underneath here at the head. I appreciate that they made a Return of the Jedi figure. I would have preferred a regular Vader first, and then they make this one later, because I would like a really well sculpted Vader helmet first. But, they're obviously going with the special edition of Return of the Jedi here, in that he doesn't have eyebrows, but it looks like his eyebrows are sculpted on, but they're not painted, so that's kind of weird. It's like the best of both worlds. But the scarring around his eye looks good. The paint's pretty good, considering this is like, a basic little Hasbro plastic figure. I like that they did like an orangish wash over the skin to give the scarring a little bit of color, a little bit of paint texture to it. And the eyes are actually really well done. I like the mouth. It's actually kind of a decent likeness, considering their Princess Leia likeness was pretty awful. But I like the detailing inside the mask there. Speaking of detailing inside the mask, you can see inside here, they sculpted like his little eyepiece and the little gack that goes inside the top of the head. There's no paint detail to it, but I do appreciate the fact that they sculpted that stuff in there. Same thing with the helmet if you look inside. Another thing I'm disappointed by is the use of cloth on this figure. If you've seen my other reviews, you know how much I just flat out loathe cloth on 6-inch plastic action figures. Especially even compared to just the Anakin figure, which featured minimal cloth, just like Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, which isn't that distracting. This features a lot of cloth, not only his cape, but this whole, sections that come down his side and wrap around the back. This kind of material on like a 1-to-1 scale, like a human scale, is fine, but when you shrink it down to like 1/12 scale, that cloth doesn't lay right. It feels thicker, it feels wrong. And also just from like a creative standpoint, technically his entire outfit, if you look at it, is made of a kind of cloth. So why would you go with plastic, 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 and then pick one kind of thing to make cloth? It just doesn't make sense to me. If the entire outfit's cloth and you're going all plastic, then make the entire thing plastic. Also, the cape, they did Darth Maul earlier, and his cloak, the entire thing was sculpted, and it looked rad, and it hangs really cool, and it's got a good look. I wish they could have gone with the sculpted cape, so that way it could have been consistent with Darth Maul. I thought they were off, like, on the right path with Darth Maul, and now they've gone all clothy with this, and I just can't stand it. Focusing on the sculpt, though, they did a great job on his arms. His, the legs, the boots all look really good. The articulation on this figure is fine. The ankles are a little tight, though. It's hard to get him to lean forward, so he has a tendency to lean back a lot. But that's not because of the joint itself. The quality of the joint's fine, it's just mine's a little tight. And then his little breathing box and the buttons all look good. And they're painted fine. And I think they did a good job with that. Even that little grid, that little silver and black grid looks really good. The buttons aren't perfect, but whatever. The chest looks good, for the most part. I'm really happy with that. Speaking of his chest, the sculpt on his chest feels a little bit too wide. Same thing with his crotch area, it feels a little bit too big. It looks like he's got this kind of big, wide belly torso area, and it doesn't look dimensionally correct. Speaking of dimensionally incorrect, his head without the helmet on looks tiny. He looks like a pinhead, so I think the dimensions on this figure are a bit off. Like his shoulders and chest all look a bit too big, his head's too small. Also, the chain that goes around his cape, he did have a little chain that went around, you know, his neck in the movie, but the size of this chain compared to what it was in the movie, if you went to scale, this would be massively huge in the movie. It'd be like this big pimp chain. I think, man, there's a lot of little things wrong with this figure. Even his cape, you know, they've got these little corner flaps on the inside, which is a nice idea, but they're just so huge and they just really stand out. The articulation on his head's pretty good, though. I got to point out there's a ball joint at the bottom of his helmet in the neck, so the articulation on his head's actually really decent. Same thing with his arms. These little shoulder pieces might be in the way a bit, but he has a decent range of motion. His left arm's a little tighter than his right, but his right arm goes kind of high. And you do got the basic swivel in the wrist joint, so I do dig that. And I'm surprised that he's got the mid-torso cut. The cloth stays in place a bit, but I'm happy that you can move him there. Let's take a look at his lightsaber. Unlike the other lightsabers in the past, there is no little peg on here, like a little nub to fit into a hole on his belt. There is no spot on his belt for this to attach to. But the blade attaches to the hilt, and then obviously it could fit into his hand. I misspoke earlier. There is a little bit of a sweet spot with this helmet where if you press it down just the right way, you will feel it click into place. It's kind of hard to find, but there you go. Now, I am not a huge fan of this figure, as you might be able to tell. I do not like the use of cloth on it. I think there's something off about the sculpt. Dimensionally, there are things that are not proportionate. I don't like that his helmet connects to his shoulders so quickly. It looks like it has no neck. There's no good space between the two. And that little chain around his cape looks like a necklace. It just looks silly. This whole thing did not turn out good. It's not the best by Hasbro, and I hope they make a second Vader down the road, a better Vader down the road. So bear all this in mind if you're interested in getting this figure. Thanks for watching.